Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yoshua Hawkins. Well, Russia may be facing more sanctions. We'll have those details. Also, North Korea test fires another missile and blames it on U.S. provocations. And an interesting discussion on the Syrian no-fly zone. We'll have some details on that. Right. Well, all of this and much more, but first, too much milk. Well, we've all heard the phrase, don't cry over spilt milk, but dairy farmers across the country are spilling it on purpose. Between January and August of 2016, American farmers have dumped 43 million gallons of milk out in the fields, manure lagoons, and wherever they can. Now, there is simply too much milk being produced right now, and it costs more to haul it away than it's worth.
Interesting. Well, the surplus of milk in 2016 came in response to a shortage just 2 years ago when dairy farmers began increasing the supply to help regulate high prices. Today, the excess milk has overwhelmed farmers as the price of milk has been slashed 36% since that high in 2014.
Well, besides dumping the milk, Dairy Management Incorporated, a marketing firm, has stepped in to encourage restaurants to use more milk products on their menus. Now, McDonald's, for example, has made the switch from margarine to using real butter for their muffins, and Taco Bell has smothered cheese all over its latest and greatest meal.
Wow, it's amazing that there was just utterly too much milk. Well, the USDA is also trying to help out farmers by committing to purchase $20 million of cheese surplus. The government is wanting to do that, and some milk is also being donated to food banks as well. While these measures are giving some relief, there is still too much milk being produced, amazingly, and the dairy industry is now looking for ways to cut back their herds to save their family farms. In the meantime, they will continue to cry over spilled milk. So they're not getting the profit out of it because there's too much of a surplus. So hopefully they don't go under as a result of this.
Well, Italy's finance ministry recently released a new report disclosing a serious tax evasion problem that continues to plague Italy's economy. Now, the report found that between 2010 and 2014, the amount of taxes collected was, on average, 109 billion euros less than what should have been collected.
Well, the report highlights that non-payment of VAT and personal tax income account for about 3/4 of the total evaded tax. The VAT in Italy is the value-added tax, and it is an indirect tax on all business transactions involving goods and services only paid by EU consumers. Now, in 2010, for example, the VAT for business transactions and purchases was 20%, and the tax for basic products was 4 to 10%. A tax of 4 to 8% was also levied on assets.
Well, it seems that Italians are just not paying their taxes. Tax experts argue it is mainly due to the country's extremely complex tax laws. Now, one member of the CGIL union, or the Italian General Confederation of Labor, reported that tax codes can be misleading and very high in the country, ranging anywhere between 50 and 60%.
You wonder how anyone could actually survive, even running a business, with a tax rate of 50 to 60%. Yeah. Unreal. Well, Natwest, a British bank in London, has notified Russia Today News that they are closing their accounts in the European country. RT received this official statement which said, "We have recently undertaken a review of your banking arrangements with us and reached the conclusion that we will no longer provide these facilities. Our decision is final, and we are not prepared to enter into any discussion in relation to it."
The letter was received at RT's London offices, basically stating they will close RT's accounts within 2 months. Now, at this point, no further information has been given, and according to existing regulations in the UK, it is a normal procedure for a bank not to offer any explanation. Now, RT has been a customer of Natwest for over 10 years, and this notification comes basically without any warning.
Well, I wonder how that's going to affect business for RT in that area. Well, RT's lawyers are looking into what this could mean for the news broadcasting company on a wider scale, and if further consequences could come as a chain reaction. While the company itself was extremely disturbed by the news, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, had a few choice words for the British government. It seems when the UK decided to leave the EU, they also left all of their freedom of speech obligations there. Looks like they're leaving all bad habits behind.
Well, Haiti might be facing another hurdle. The UN says that the cholera outbreak after Hurricane Matthew may be underestimated. Now, the southwestern part of Haiti has roads that remain still impassable because of the hurricane damage. Right. Now, David Nabarro, the special advisor to the UN chief, is concerned because sick people are not being treated. So roads are still impassable. They're not getting the aid to those who are sick, and therefore they're not getting treated. And of course, that's how that disease can continue to spread.
And they still haven't fully recovered from the earthquake that they had several years ago either. Right. Well, it seems like they can't catch a break. Well, German Chancellor Angela Merkel believed more sanctions against Russia might be necessary. She expressed her views ahead of talks with the Russian president on Syria. She stated, "The French president and I will use the opportunity the meeting gives us to talk to the Russian president about the situation in Syria."
Now, she continued, "I already held extensive discussions at the G20 summit in Hangzhou, as did the French president. The humanitarian situation in Syria has become even more catastrophic, and this has clearly been caused by the Syrian and Russian bombardments on helpless people. Hospitals, doctors, and of course, we will bring this up."
Well, delivering humanitarian aid to people will be the main focus in her meeting with President Putin. Russian, Ukrainian, and French leaders will be among those hosted by Germany for peace talks concerning eastern Ukraine, while the German and French leaders plan to also address Russia's support for the Syrian government. Well, the issue has triggered growing tensions between Moscow and, of course, the West.
Well, of course, where the Middle East is concerned, it's not just Syria that's in chaos. Things have never actually settled down in Iraq. And Larry McGee has our story on what's being called the final battle for Mosul. Larry, what are the details in this battle?
The excitement began after an announcement by the Iraqi Prime Minister of the government's intentions to retake the critical city of Mosul from the Syrian mercenaries of ISIS. Flanked by military officials, Prime Minister al-Abadi delivered a televised speech to the citizens of the ancient province of Nineveh, declaring that the time of victory has come and that operations to liberate the city of Mosul have started. The Iraqi head is promising that Iraq's national flag will soon be raised in the city, which ISIS had previously taken and designated as the capital of its caliphate. The Prime Minister stated that only the army and police of Iraq will be entering the city, with the exception of special groups created to dispense humanitarian aid to the 1.5 million civilians, on behalf of which the UN is said to be expressing extreme concern. Though Baghdad is determined to demonstrate its ability to stand on its own too in the coming face-off, Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter says the U.S. and its confederates are prepared to support the Iraqi army in its bid to recapture Mosul. The secretary is quoted as stating further that the Mosul operation represents a decisive moment to bring ISIS to a lasting defeat and end the insurgents' hatred and brutality. Ahead of it all, Iraqi war machines are being prepared and showcased, along with thousands of leaflets which are being dropped by the Iraqi aircraft with safety instructions for residents. Forces are said to simply be waiting for the green light from Baghdad. The fight is being billed as the final battle between the mercenaries of ISIS and the government, intended to reestablish the prestige of the Iraqi army and save the people of Mosul in the ancient Nimrodic province of Nineveh. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, interesting. There's a lot of tension, a lot of battles, a lot of disunity in that area, and I bet you the civilians are really wanting to see all these things put to an end so they can get back to some form of normality in their homes. Well, as the battle for Aleppo continues, rebel factions say they broke through government lines. Both jihadists and rebel forces have been battling for the city for the past few years. Well, just a few days after the battle to end the siege on the rebel-held Aleppo began, a number of rebel groups have broken through Syrian lines.
Ahmad Sultan, a commander in Arar al-Sham, said in an interview with the Daily Beat news agency, "God willing, we will open the Ramoses Road today with our brothers from the Army of Conquest, and God willing, we will become one united army." Now, a short drive from Turkey's border, Aleppo is Syria's biggest city before the conflict, home to more than 2 million people, and was once Syria's economic powerhouse. But 5 years into the Syrian conflict, humanitarians have warned that people in East Aleppo risk starvation.
Sad. The U.S. and Britain have warned that they will impose sanctions on Russia and Syria over the conflict in Syria's Aleppo. John Kerry said, "We are considering sanctions, and let me make it clear. The president, speaking of Barack Obama, has not taken any option off the table at this time. So we'll see where we are in the next few days over the context of discussions." Well, Mr. Kerry made these comments at a press conference with British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson.
He made these comments at a press conference with British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson in London. Now, top diplomats also called on Moscow to help end the conflict in Syria. Ministers from 9 countries gathered in Lausanne, but failed to come up with a joint statement in the Syrian crisis.
Well, North Korea is considering to be a severe threat to the region as they have tested another ballistic missile. Cho Jun-hyuk, South Korea's foreign ministry spokesman, said as North Korea test-fired another intermediate ballistic missile, which is a clear violation of the UN Security Council resolution, and that is regardless of success or failure. The government strongly condemns it, and it is a great threat to the safety and security of the Korean Peninsula and the international society as a whole.
The spokesman also called on North Korea to abide by the UN resolution. Now, the Pentagon also condemned the test, calling it a provocation. South Korea and U.S. say that North Korea has unsuccessfully tested the ballistic missile with medium-range missiles that can reach U.S. bases in the Pacific. The Security Council is considering new sanctions against Pyongyang after its 5th missile test last month. North Korea says its tests are in response to U.S. provocations in the region.
Well, in a recent meeting with diplomats of South Korea and Washington, Secretary of State John Kerry warned North Korea of retaliation if it launches a nuclear attack on the U.S. or South Korea. When South Korea activists are targeting the diplomats, protesting that the U.S. is bringing nuclear war to the Korean Peninsula.
In that meeting with the Korean diplomats, the U.S. again made it clear that North Korea would be met with an overwhelming response to a nuclear attack. The U.S. is deploying more advanced weapons to the region, along with a missile defense system scheduled to be in use next year. Now, Kerry spoke of the U.S.'s commitment to defend South Korea through a robust defense posture and through extended deterrence, including the U.S. nuclear umbrella, conventional strike, and missile defense capabilities.
South Korea activists opposed the militarization of the Korean Peninsula, especially with the presence of the American THAAD missile system. Many argue that the growing military alliance between their region and the U.S. fuels regional arms race while risking Seoul's relation with its neighbors. Well, Oh Mi-jin-gong of the Solidarity for Peace and Reunification of Korea spoke at a protest saying the United States' extended deterrent policy doesn't guarantee security and will bring a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula. So obviously they're very frustrated about this.
She continued, extended deterrence mean nuclear war, and the continued deterrence strategy is now crystallizing into solid plans and actions. Now, South Korean leaders have recently called on the South Korean government to obtain nuclear weapons. Now, those discussions are underway to redeploy B-52 or B-1B bombers, F-22 stealth fighter jets, and nuclear-powered submarines to that region.
Interesting. The U.S. removed its nuclear-powered warheads in the 1990s, but with the renewed nuclear umbrella over South Korea, Washington has moved one step closer to the redeployment of nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, concerning ISIS and Assad, take a look at this C-SPAN video where Defense Secretary Ashton Carter answered questions regarding Assad and the events taking place in Syria. Take a look.
As the president has said, Assad has lost his legitimacy and cannot be a part of the long-term future of Syria. Is that statement still operative?
I think it is. And I'll just give a general answer to your general question. You're right, it was discussed earlier. And even though we are going to be, I'm confident, militarily successful against ISIL, insofar as the Syrian civil war is concerned, the violence can't end there. The violence can't end there. The violence can't end there until there's a political transition from Assad to a government that is decent and that can govern the Syrian people and put that tragically broken country back together. That doesn't look in sight now. That doesn't look in sight now. That doesn't look in sight now. It is what we talked earlier about. Secretary Kerry's trying to make arrangements to promote.
Well, let me just ask this, if you don't mind, Secretary Carter. It would help if the barrel bombing ended. And I spoke to a Democratic colleague of mine today. I've been calling for a no-fly zone to stop the barrel bombing, and I asked this colleague of mine on the other side of the aisle if he would support that, and he said yes. He said, I want to call it something else rather than a no-fly zone, but that this particular senator, it is a fact that this particular senator has now changed his position and would like us to take action to prevent the barrel bombing. What is your position about that, and wouldn't it help if we took decisive action and ended this carnage?
I don't know the specific proposal which you're discussing with your colleague. Make one comment and then see if the chairman wants to add anything.
I think he was talking about a no-fly zone,
well,
but described in more palatable terms.
There are a number of different proposals have been made, but the one that I think the focus on right now is the one Secretary Kerry's trying to promote, namely a no-fly zone for the Russians and the Syrians who are attacking the Syrian people. If they're talking about a no-fly zone for American aircraft fighting ISIL, needless to say, that's not going to get any enthusiasm, get strong opposition from me. But I think that's what it's. But it's not called that. But Secretary Kerry's trying to get a stand down of the Syrian and Russian Air Force, and if he's successful, that would be a good thing. Yes, the chairman, if he has anything to add.
Senator, the only thing I'd say is, as the situation on the ground changes, I think I have a responsibility, we, the Joint Force, has a responsibility to make sure the President has a full range of options. We have discussed that issue in the past under certain conditions. The conditions on the ground will change, and we'll continue to look at those options and make sure they're available to the President.
What about the option of controlling the airspace so that barrel bombs cannot be dropped?
All the options.
What do you think of that option, sir?
Right now, Senator, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war. For us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war, 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 go to war against Syria and Russia. That's a pretty fundamental decision that certainly I'm not going to make.
To impose a no-fly zone.
Chairman, could I for a second say, just answer?
No, Senator Gillibrand.
That's not what I said, Chairman.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I do think
What Senator asked me was to control all of the airspace.
No, what he asked was, should we have a no-fly zone so we can protect these people from being slaughtered? That's what he's talking about.
I answered that first.
That's what we're all talking about.
so. That would not require going to war, full scale, would it?
Not necessarily, Senator. I'm sorry, but I tried to answer the first question first, and then I was responding to the second part of your question. But I did not mean to say that imposing a no-fly zone would require us to go to war. That's not the question I was answering. For us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war. But I did not mean to say that imposing a no-fly zone would require us to go to war. For us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war. But I did not mean to say that imposing a no-fly zone would require us to go to war. That's not the question I was answering.
Interesting.
Sounds like he couldn't make up his mind. Are we going to war or are we not going to war?
Yeah, time will definitely tell. Well, even though we're heading into the winter months in the Northern Hemisphere, the hatred in the nations is definitely heating up. Well, is there any protection from what seems like impending nuclear war? If so, where can you go to find that safety and protection? Well, are you ready for the answer? The house of Yahweh is where you can go, and of course, Yahweh and his laws are the only protection for anyone seeking safety from the coming destruction. Contact the house of Yahweh to find out what Yisrael Hawkins has been showing mankind for over 50 years as to what brings war and what brings peace.
And when you do contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. To contact them, you can write the House of Yahweh at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. Call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. And for any emails, you can email at info@yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen. And once again, we'd like to remind you of the Yisrael Says program, a Bible tool that can help you study and get all the questions you've ever wanted to know about the Bible answered by just punching it in the search and look at all the results. So go to www.yisraelsays.com for more.
Well, with darkness looming over the hearts and the minds of man, don't go anywhere, because up next, the only one authorized to bring forth true light to the entire world through the teachings found in the Holy Scriptures, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.